Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Co-host Rich Gear here as well, and we have great guests. We've had him on our show before, Dan Jansen. Glad to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Glad to have you here, man, back in the States here. He's been over in the Sudan for how many years? Have you been over there now?
Actually, since full-time since 2016.
Wow. It's been that long already. Wow.
South Sudan, the newest country in the world.
Yeah, South Sudan, yep. I know. Mm-hmm. And living in some quite primitive conditions sometimes, right?
Well, yes. The first year we lived in the bush and in more of a remote area. It was kind of a conflict zone, and a lot of raiding and stealing of cows, women, and children nearby us.
Wow.
And a little bit potentially quite dangerous.
Yeah, and if you may give us a little history, want you? But tonight's show, right? Doug come up with the title.
It's Ecology Ideology.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking a little bit about the influx of certain ideological constructs that people use to justify their political agendas.
Okay.
And I think that we're going to also tie that into how it relates to the creation evolution question. Because there's a biblical worldview, and then there's the worldview of the world. And we need to distinguish between what is really truth and what is really something that is not true.
Well, a man-made construct, basically.
That's right, yes.
You got secular, materialism running certain agendas. A lot of it right now. I've really been very interested and confounded a little bit about some of the contradictory ideas that come up with. They'll come out, and the same people who seem to basically believe it's okay to kill infants in the womb will basically kill you or ostracize you if you cut down a tree. I mean, it's a very contradictory type of scenario where human beings have been devalued, and it's almost pantheistic in a lot of respects. So
even to the point where we have people who are advocating the extinction of human beings.
Oh, that's big time. Yeah, you're hearing more and more about that right now.
Well, they see man as a disruptor of a very long process of fine-tuned, delicate, balanced evolutionary process. And so man comes in now, and he's actually starting to manage or control what's happening in the environment, and they see this as a real threat. And we see this as if it's properly applied, the idea of management or stewardship and mastery over the things in the environment that are a threat to stability and a threat to health. All these things are to be managed. Floods and droughts. These are things that we've learned to manage in the development world. So we no longer succumb to the droughts and the floods to the same degree as before. The storms or fires. We've learned a type of mastery over the environment and our focus really properly should be on human flourishing. Now, if we're going to just rape the earth and exploit it and leave a devastated earth to the next generation, we're not talking about that. But there's a new generation of people out there that really want to see the impact or the non-impact focus, because the earth is perceived to be this fragile thing of many years of evolution. And it's the same type of fear of change that we find in the pantheistic or the animistic world, where their fear of change that might anger the spirits. Well, we might be in another sense in this deep ecology, extreme environmentalism type of approach. We might be sort of upsetting this delicate balance when we come at it from a management perspective rather than a hands-off perspective.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because we go back to the book of Genesis, and the dominion mandate, so to speak, was given to human beings to be over the animals, but not, it was meant to be a stewardship role. But it was interesting, as things got broken And again, with a non-theological viewpoint, with a non-biblical worldview, how do you explain? This is what they start out with the idea of we're evolving upward. Man is the pinnacle, but now, because I think the devil is the father of lies behind some of this stuff.
Exactly.
Now they're having mankind suicide out. I mean, it's this. I see this a lot. Once you reject the Creator and you become yourself, deify yourself, or you become man-centered, and then you realize there's nothing higher than me. If you don't believe that, you realize it's pointless.
Well,
and then evolution, it comes up to that, and so that you come up with this rising thing where man is we're the smart things, and then suddenly we're terrible now, and it's like they're suicide. They're trying to kill. There's these people out that they want to get rid of like 500 million or 1 billion people. They want to downsize the human race totally. They want to the Bill Gates of the world. I've heard run some of these guys, and yeah, it's a geopolitical, but it's anti-biblical.
It is
because the Dominion Mandate is exactly what you said. It's not about raping the earth or trashing the earth. It's about understanding that we are the highest pinnacle of God's creation. We are the only ones actually made in God's image. He's given us this priority, this preeminence, not to trash His creation, but to steward it and make it flourish. And everybody benefits when that happens.
Yeah,
so let's get to the biblical perspective.
Sure.
Why don't you give us some scriptural backing for what God's perspective is on this, and what His original intentions were for Him creating man on the earth and for populating the earth with His with people that resembled Him.
But by the way, Dan, you are not. He's a hands-on kind of a guy. I want you to talk a little bit because you're over there doing. It's a missionary job, but you're doing agricultural and you're setting up a whole thing over there for a brand new country that's really in poverty, trying to get them. And to do that is because you have the biblical worldview. So I think what Doug said was really good. I mean, you want to start with that, but also maybe explain what you're actually doing, some of the stuff you've done or have been doing and are doing.
Well, the world system comes at this idea of development from the perspective of it's really about people are a product of their environment. This comes from evolution, it comes from humanist ideology. And so in order to fix things, they consider that, yes, if we give someone something, and because they assume that mankind is, or people, we should say people, maybe, are inherently good, and if they just change their environment and give them the things that they need to flourish, they'll somehow flourish. But I'm finding that without the Christian worldview in place, people are basically selfish, and they act on their own initiatives, and not to necessarily to be a blessing to others. So if we've got to bring in this character building foundation based on a biblical worldview in order for people to look at each other and say, how can I bless you? And this is what good customer service is about, is how to bless one another. So if we go back to Genesis 1, 26 and 28, we're finding these words that people are almost scared of these days. The word called subdue. And I've actually got a website that I've turned it into an acronym, meaning that, and I put it on all my emails and stuff. It's basically subdue is really about bringing value addition from the things that God has created. And then also to push back or fight against anything that may diminish in human flourishing. So we're trying to bring out more products to and serve each other by solving problems and environmental problems and all the other production problems, and increase the human flourishing and kind of develop a mastery over an excellent standard in being productive. And so they use the acronym SUBDUE, strategically utilize best development unique to the environment.
Wow, that's pretty clever.
And
you
so,
come up with that? Pretty
yeah,
sweet.
I worked that a little bit, but that's kind of what we're thinking about. Not that we're going to rule in a way that we're oppressing our subjects. This is what we first think when we think about the word subdue, and a lot of times it may be used in that way. But in this context, it's more of bringing out human flourishing. So that reign and rule over the animals and subduing or controlling, that is to maximize the blessing from one person to another in mutually beneficial exchanges of goods and services and developing value addition. So then, I've been studying the book of Genesis chapter 1 and 2, particularly 2 here lately, when it talks about in verse 5, it talks about there was no man to
till the earth,
till or work or cultivate or in the old King James dress, which means to embellish or improve or make an improvement on. But that word is abad, A-B-A-D, and it's also used in Genesis 2:15. And that word abad now is under attack by a group of people that are more leaning toward the idea of we don't want man to interfere, or we don't want man to manage or steward or have dominion or basically have much of an effect at all. Just be hunter-gatherer type. That's kind of the ideal that's being sought after, and they're saying we want this word to mean serve. Now, sometimes that word abad means serve, but how can you put this in the context if it says there was no man to serve the garden, and there was no man, Genesis 2:15, where it says, and God put Adam in the garden to serve it. It obviously has an agricultural context to it, and so those when we use the grammar in that way. And insert that interpretation, like some new, really ultra modern translations do. It really doesn't serve the proper meaning of the word.
Doesn't serve the meaning serve,
No, exactly, and that's really one of the areas I think that the scriptures of the Bible are under attack and being reinterpreted based on this new non-impact, fragile earth type of non-mastery, non-dominion, non-stewarding, non-managing, non-developing kind of idea that we're trying to shift everybody. So the man is kind of on the bottom at the same level as all the features of the earth, instead of this anthropocentric. And I don't know if I really like the word anthropocentric anyway. I kind of think of a theocentric.
That's what I like.
Yeah.
That. Yeah,
theocentric, where we're called to serve each other.
And by doing so, we're serving God.
We're serving God.
I was going to say, because that dominion... Sorry, Doug, I didn't mean to cut you off there, because I heard him. He's ready to get in here, and Doug hasn't got a word in edgewise. Dan and I going together, he's not going to get in much. No, I'm just kidding you, buddy. But I just say the dominion mandate, that was in Genesis 1, Genesis 2. Mm-hmm. But after the curse, the dominion mandate is still in effect, correct?
That's right. If you look at Genesis chapter 9, you'll see a repeat of fill the earth. And these shall be food for you, and basically it's repeating the same emphasis as that throughout the Bible, particularly in 9, to say nothing has really changed here, but instead of finding your work fulfilling to bring forth the value addition and things, now you have death on the scene and you have toil, and so the work was to be fulfilling. But because of all the interference in the environment falling apart, work became toil, and so now we're trying to shift it back and bring a blessing by turning toil into or reduce toil into being more productive and maximize the blessing.
Well, I looked at Proverbs or Ecclesiastes was talking about work is part of the curse, but it's also a blessing. Mm-hmm. In other words, in this world, it gives us some purpose. It gives us when you transform things and then the abundance of the earth, it produces things that make. Like I say, with the South Sudan, it would be neat to see that turn into a paradise.
It could. It could feed a third of Africa.
Wow. So I have the question I have.
Yeah.
is this philosophy that's being promoted nowadays that they basically want everything to go to weeds and to jungle and to go back to just everything unmanaged, and they think that's good? Is that what the...
Well, the interesting part about this is that parts of the United States, particularly the Northeast, because we don't need them to produce, there's big parts of the United States that actually have gone back to bush and jungle. People don't realize that, and there's just about the same amount of forested land today as there was back in the beginning of 1900.
Yeah.
Well, there's vast areas of forests and jungle and all over the place.
Exactly.
And you go up to northern Michigan and you see a lot of the things that was cut over during the lumbering days. It was all cut down and burned over, and it's now back to pretty much the way it was 150 years ago.
Yeah, we actually have more trees in Michigan now than we had before they cut everything down. And everybody likes to say, "Oh, look what they did! They get clear cut." I mean, they think Michigan actually housed the West Coast, our pine, our white pine.
And the Chicago fire, they rebuilt Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, but go ahead.
There's actually more leaf area index on the earth today than there was 30 years ago. So much so that we can cover the whole United States with 2 layers of additional leaves. Some of this is
I think I got half of them this fall.
Some of this is from tree planting, some of it's from irrigation, some of it's from fertilizing, but a very big percentage, about 70% of that, is actually coming from the additional CO2 that's out there, because plants flourish and they become much more efficient in their utilization of water when they have a higher amount of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Yeah, I've never really understood why they're so hostile to CO2. Yeah, we can't breathe it, but I mean, CO2 makes foliation much more, and then they produce oxygen. So
exactly.
it's a symbiotic. It actually works very well. And they're trying to knock all these quote carbon emission gas. I go, this is just, it's like it's suiciding out. It's like you're purposely trying to destroy what has been a very economic. America in one respect has been involved up until recently with clothing and housing and production and blessing the entire planet in a lot of respects. But because they started with a biblical worldview. Right. They really did, and we've rejected it in the last 50 years. Maybe it's been longer, really, but that's really where it's taken on. Big. It's got the headwinds. The winds behind them right now.
We've lost this idea that we're to maximize the blessing to others and to maximize our productivity and problem solving in an excellent standard, and we've become complacent, and we have decided that we have chosen our time toward leisure and material possessions, and this is where we need to turn this around, because if we're going to be relevant to other people, and if we're going to have a standard of truth, we need to base things on truth, so we can bless other people, because the lack of truth is oppressive, or when the truth is not applied, is oppressive.
Where do these ideas originate? Who are there certain spots in our history where we've started to embrace this? And
I think Rachel Carlson's book really changed things.
The Silent Spring.
The Silent Spring, yes. But if you also look at the German, the emergence of the Nazi Party, this type of ideology of deep ecology was very, very strong in the Nazi Party. Was it
really?
Yes.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yes. They really wanted to get people back to organic production and things of this nature. Now, that doesn't mean that it's bad or anything, because it was part of the Nazi Party. But this is one time it was really strongly emphasized in a place, and a lot of these ideas do have some roots in that era of in that type of thinking.
It's always very ironic to me that the more secular they get, it's like, it reminds me of C.S. Lewis's book in the Screw Tape Letters, where the devil was talking to Wormwood, and he says, no, it's not like we want to get people off the biblical worldview, but we don't want to stay there. We want to be worshipped ourselves. We want to basically, and this seems to be what's ironic. Like the Nazi is kind of, it was based a lot of the whole idea of a survival of the fittest, or basically Darwinian philosophy. Yet Hitler himself and the leadership were very into the occult.
Yes.
Once you get off the dime, once you get off the biblical worldview, every other thing comes in there to swipe you off, and then you come up with every wind of doctrine, every wind of, and it's usually a deception, and eventually Lucifer gets in charge, and his ideas come in charge. And when you start with materialism, but you never end up there. Most of these secularists end up becoming New Agers, or a lot of New Age type stuff comes into that stuff, into their worldview. And I think it's why pantheism is kind of a harbinger, if you will, of some of that stuff. They're worshiping nature, but eventually they'll be worshiping the powers that be behind it. That's why you got so much a rise of Wiccan and all this other stuff, that we're worshiping the fertility gods and goddesses, and all this other stuff begins to come up, because it doesn't stay in that materialistic realm. God wants us to bless. He wants us to be blessed, to steward the earth, and to produce the bounty, even in this fallen world. And we always have to predicate everything on the fact this world has been broken. That's why I asked you the question earlier about the dominion mandate. That was before the fall, but it's still in effect. It's never been abrogated or rescinded. That command to subdue the earth.
Even our churches are buying into this.
Yeah.
And we're seeing there is a book that came out called The Population Bomb.
Yes.
That was another one.
Paul Ehrlich, yeah.
And so that was very influential in the abortion idea, and you got to keep the population down, and there's...
it doesn't help that every one of his predictions came out wrong.
It's neo-Malthusianism is really what it really is.
It really is, yeah.
And the Club of Rome report, this is where the concept of sustainability as an emphasized focus came out of that Club of Rome report, and this neo-Malthusian idea that we're going to run out of all these resources. But nobody took into account that if we keep the Christian worldview in place and keep developing everyone's individual unique gifts and talents and abilities and education, every single person has a unique contribution to develop some kind of ingenious invention or something. In man's ingenuity, when the Christian worldview is in place, will outpace population. It'll outpace the utilization of the resources that God has given us. We'll develop solutions. That's not to say we shouldn't be wise about it and just burn through our resources until we end up with extremely high prices for things. But we've actually shown that the prices of things have gotten lower and lower as man's ingenuity has come in to solve problems. That's something that they never predicted, and all their predictions, environmental disaster and running out of resources, and the neo-Malthusian idea, they all were wrong.
My favorite example of that was, I read this years ago, and I'm just paraphrasing because I read it years ago, but it was before the invention of the automobile. They thought cities could only get no bigger than 10,000 people, because anything more in the horse manure would make it was that the garbage would be too, and the stench would be too great. And of course, then the automobile gets invented, and of course, changes. Now you got millions of people in cities, But the point of it is, it's like the Lord Himself inspires people. If you're listening to it, He is the source of revelation anyway. Yes. And even those who don't give God the credit for it, He has given them the revelation, and there are things that we've been able to do. I mean, I heard about something today where they're even talking about being able to have a engine powered without using gasoline or oil. And the guy, I tried to go, what is this? You saw it on some History Channel. How many years it takes to develop that, I don't know, but the ingenuity that the Lord has given into us, we cannot do what God does. We cannot create ex nihilo, but we can take what He has made and adapt it and modify and improve on things that are there, including even the broken part. We can make it better. I mean, look, the United States has been the hub of the earth, and I think it's because it had the biblical worldview, basically. And they were also part of the biblical worldview. Is you don't always do things merely for your own self-aggrandizement, your own self-pleasure. It's you're planning legacy because you believe things for the future generations. A lot of people today, it's all about me, now. It's nothing in the future.
Something different that we experienced was when we went to my ancestral home in England, Sotterley, where for that place that were at 800 years was in the hands of 3 different families, but they had developed a policy of planting a new grove of English oak every 20 years, and they would harvest one of those groves every 140 years. And so you're planting this new grove for your great-great-grandchildren.
Yeah, I mean, the pioneers that went out west were thinking they want to make a better life, not just for their immediate family, but for the things that would come out. And that's the kind of stuff that it seems to be lost in recent generations to some extent. We're doing stuff for the immediate here and now rather than things that could last for a long time. But I tell you, the other side, they are sometimes the ultimate gradualists. The gradualism, the evil one, has really done a lot to undermine the biblical world. Sometimes I wonder, the United States being one of the last Christian nations on the earth that still ostensibly proclaims to be Christian, it's the reason why they're trying to take it down so hard, because Europe's kind of gone down. They've gone secular. And of course, Muslim countries and in Hindu countries, they never had it. Some of them tried to get it, but the gospel message needs to go out, and the church needs to get to be able to stand up for things, and part of that is pragmatism. I mean, the Bible is very good. You don't work, you don't eat. And the Bible is not merely, it's not full of aphorisms and sayings and ideas only for the esoteric, abstract, pie in the sky things. It does do that, but it gives you things for now. Don't live like God is your belly. If you live only for the here and now, you're going to be in trouble. But by saying things, it's oftentimes when you want to bless others, you get yourself blessed as well. That's what happens with all these inventions. It comes back to you tenfold, pressed down, shaken down, even in a physical way. It does that. And so I think it's amazing some of the stuff you've done over in the Sudan. So
you had a list of signs that people are starting to fall into this trap. Can you tell us what those things were?
Well, the way that we use nature this and nature that, we really shouldn't, because it originates back to God. And also the idea of serving the earth rather than creating flourishing and value addition from the things that were created. There's a lot of different distinctions that we can make out of it, and sometimes Colossians 1:20, and what says He will reconcile all things on the earth to Himself. This verse is often distorted to something to say that all the creatures are going to be reconciled or and so that one is a big distortion that's there, and so there's so many different things that we can watch for where we're in repenting of environmental sins rather than repenting of the full range of sins. You can see it skewed, and you kind of have to watch for it because there's such a thing that they call creation care, and it's good, but you can get in kind of a mix of synchronize these different ideas, and so you got to watch for that.